Good morning to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5 a.m. Club. It's early morning, Monday morning. We're rapidly approaching the end of this summer here in the Southern Hemisphere. It's a beautiful mild morning with a gentle breeze blowing, and it is absolutely magnificent. It's going to be another cracker of a day. Yesterday was perfect. I spent it in the pool with my grandchildren, and it was one of those magical sort of Sundays that come rarely, unfortunately, here in Sydney, because we work most of the week, and the weather over the past couple of years has been fairly inclement, so much so that on Saturday we had this massive storm where furniture in my backyard was just blown all over the place, and some of it ended up in my neighbour's backyard. But anyway, it happened, and we've moved on from there, and just like everything, every week, every day is a new beginning. A new beginning with different outcomes. We don't quite know, we can't quite predict what the outcome's going to be, which leads me into this new book summary that I'm going to do today. And it's an interesting one by a female author, a mother of four, mother of triplets. She had one child and they decided to try for another, and instead of one more, they had triplets, two identical twins and another child, so 4 in total. So she decided to gather her thoughts, gather her skills, gather her wisdom that she'd accumulated, and write a book on parenting. And the title of this book is Secrets to Parenting Without Giving a Fuck. So a lot of books over the past decade have appeared with that 4-letter expletive in the title. But once again, I guess it's all about marketing and putting out the message. And these days you need to attract attention where possible. So the title of a book can give an edge to an author who is trying to build some readership and build some following. So the key message from this book is to teach kids for them to be accountable and self-empowered, and to allow them autonomy in their growth, because each of us are going to live a different life. We're going to have different experiences along the way, and as a parent, what we're called to do is to leverage those unique individual experiences that all children have in their growth, and to allow them to make sense, allow them to gain knowledge, and now allow them to use those experiences as stepping stones to their future, rather than to feed them with a silver spoon, to allow them to take responsibility and accountability for their growth and development, but with our guidance, with the guidance of their parents, their grandparents, and all of those people around them. So this is the Montessori sort of model, where they seek to offer children an opportunity to live and grow and play with autonomy, knowing that there are limits, knowing that They are responsible for their own outcomes, and to enable them to become self-empowered to make the right decisions that end up and deliver the best consequences. Because we all know that each action has an equal and opposite reaction. That each action, each decision we make has first, second and third level consequences. And to help children understand what those consequences are so that they can learn and they can make sense of the world around them, so that as they accumulate slithers of reality throughout their lives, they're able to, as I say, build their worldview, but build their worldview from their perspective rather than the perspective of their parents, their grandparents, uncles, aunts, school teachers and everybody else. So it's a path of discovery. It's an opportunity to learn and grow, make mistakes, but use those mistakes, use those lessons to make better sense of the world around us and to gain perspective. So the author here says that parenting starts when a child is between 2 and 3. Now, you've got to start at some point, but between 2 and 3 it's important to instill limits on a child and for them to learn that no is no. They've got to understand where the limits are, and they've got to understand that the parent is the parent, and that the parent establishes and enforces those limits. And those limits are there to help a child grow and develop. Those limits are not there to limit a child, but to protect the child from having too many choices and becoming overwhelmed and anxious, I guess is the best way of putting it. So the author here makes it very clear that limits when a child is young are important, but of course when a child gets older, those limits, those apron strings need to be loosened, else you have a rebel on your hands. So I remember going to a Greek Orthodox parenting course years ago when I was a grandparent, not when I was a parent, but when I was a grandparent. And they said that the problem with most parents is that they get it arse about. And it's the 2 R's. They talk about the 2 R's, rules and relationships. When children are young, they thrive on rules. And when children become teenagers, that's when you don't impose rules, but you build and you work and you leverage a relationship. So it's important to get it the right way around, and as I said, a lot of people get it arse about. They try and be friends with their children when they're young. Don't impose limits, don't impose rules, and the child grows without those limits and gets lost and becomes a follower of other people as opposed to building its roadmap, building its future through its own stepping stones. So rules and relationship are a key message. And the author then reminds us that children don't want to be bad. They're not wired to be bad. It's just that they don't listen sometimes because they are tuned out. They're tuned out to you and tuned in to something else. They're tuned in to their feelings. They're tuned in to fun. They're tuned in to the cartoons. They're tuned in to the other kids. And by being tuned in and really, really intently tuned in means that they tune you out, and you need to somehow break into that tune and break the pattern. So an interesting way of seeing things. Once again, kids aren't bad, but you need to look at things from their perspective as opposed to your own perspective. And it's not easy being a kid, not easy being a kid in a world that is changing, that has challenges not of their making. There are relationships that they need to build, they need to fit in to groups, they need to fit in to family structures, even though those family structures are not as stable today as what they once were. There are many, many challenges that children face, and we need to help them along the way rather than hinder them and make things worse for them. And as we said, we need to look at things from their perspective. And then kids get to a point when they're 8, 9 or 10 where they're really keen to our reactions. So they watch us intently and they key into our reactions. So it's important to understand that a 10-year-old kid is really switched on, and they look at you, they learn from us, even though they don't show it. And our reactions to things, the way we react to things, the way we respond to things is something that they're really attuned to. So they look to us for guidance, and it's important for us to be able to give them the right guidance and not to overreact to things and cause grief where grief is not necessarily required. So we've got to help them. The key message is we've got to help them. So it's important to understand that there are phases and there are patterns. Children go through phases, all people go through phases, but there are also patterns that we need to look out for, and patterns are things which go beyond the phases. It's a pattern of behaviour, and we need to work with our children to interrupt any disempowering patterns that may arise. The other thing the author talks about is the fact that children respond to expectations. We've always got to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of them, and that children know, and it's good to talk about our expectations in advance and to use training runs to test their behaviour out. So we can test children out by creating environments, creating situations that we fabricate with the help of our partners and the help of our families, just to see how children respond in different situations. So we give them a test run and observe the outcomes, and observe their responses, and use that to help them where possible. Because what we practice in private is normally shown in public. What we practice in private is what we get rewarded with or penalised in public. So it's important, once again, to appreciate, to embrace and understand that we've all had a different past. We're all going to have different experiences throughout our lives. We're all going to respond to similar experiences in different ways to other children. We're going to learn different lessons from different experiences based on how we interpret things, or rather how other people help us interpret things, because the reality is that our worldview is built upon the interpretations that we give experiences that we have received in our lives, as well as interpretations that we have inherited from others, from our friends, our family, our schoolmates, our teachers, our community, our churches. All of those lessons that we have along the way are an interpretation that others have placed upon those and imposed upon us, and it's up to us, of course, to receive and to accept those lessons that we've inherited that are of course useful and empowering and help serve us, and to remove and to push away those which are not serving. Of course, each person is unique, and we are all trying to find our way and to fit in where we can. And in many ways, we replicate our parents in many ways. So one of the key lessons from this author is that the first thing that we all need to do is to forgive our parents if they have made mistakes along the way, because nobody comes into the world with a guidebook on parenting, especially people who were brought up in the 60s, people who were brought up after the war. Those generations, basically parented their children in the same vein as what they were parented. And it's important as a child or as an adult now to look back and to look and understand the intention behind what our parents did, what our teachers did, what our uncles and aunts and grandparents did. All the teachers that we've had in our lives had an intention, and that intention is to help us grow, help us develop, to protect us, because they loved us. And it's not because they wanted to cause us grief. It's not because they wanted to hurt us. They wanted to do it to help us. So as a parent, one of the big challenges that we face is to let loose and to loosen those apron strings. And we need to let go of control, else you give birth to a rebel. We need to put our egos aside, and we first need to get to know ourselves, because children, families, society is a mirror which reflects back to us who we actually are. So we need to take a good look at ourselves and to understand that if we change our approach, we will most certainly get a different result. We need to be fixed in our goals, we need to be fixed in our values, but we need to be flexible in our approach, because if we don't change, we'll end up continuing to receive the same outcomes, the same good outcomes, or possibly the same bad outcomes. So we need to assess along the way how we're tracking, whether or not we're on track or off track. And if we're off track, we need to do things differently in order to get the outcomes that we desire. It's important within a family to have a no-blame culture and to never underestimate the capability of children. We need to communicate with ourselves first. We need to communicate with our children in advance. We need to communicate before emotion kicks in, because what I've learnt from this author and other authors is that we all have, adults and children, have two levels of brain. We have the lower brain, which is based on feeling, based on emotion. It's the primitive brain. It's the one where we freeze, where we overthink things, and it's either a fight or flight response. And children have those as well. It's very, very important to understand that children are usually linked in and tuned in to their feeling brain. and they can't really think rationally or clearly about things because they're locked into their primitive brain of freeze, fight or flight. So when somebody is locked into that or tuned into that brain level, that primitive brain level, then the only way you can help them is by giving them time to calm down, to get beyond their feelings, and to help them then rationalize and think about what they've done by you asking the right questions rather than telling them what to do. Because it is a partnership. The author here talks about partnership parenting, where we respect each other, where we look for win-win outcomes, and to know that there are going to be ups and downs. There are going to be good days and bad days. But at the end of the day, our job as a parent is to get our children to be adult ready, to be society ready for when the real big problems start coming their way, that they know how to deal with them, how to deal with them themselves, and to understand that there is a solution to every problem. They can figure it out. Everything is figure-outable. And not to invite arguments, and not to micromanage, and to try and manage addictions like television, addictions like sugar, addictions like phone and tablets, and help the child, and by breaking those patterns where possible, to help them, to protect them. But before we do something as a parent, the bottom line from this author is that we need to get ourselves right first. And you can't command from the couch. You can't tell people what to do with their lives when you've got a cigarette or a beer in your hand, or that you're fighting with your husband or with your own family and you're not talking with your siblings. You need to set the ground rules. You need to set everything up first and be an example before you can start lovingly and nurturingly help children get through the steps in their lives, knowing that everybody is going to have challenges along the way, and we need to respect one another and to help one another and to help people become better people. Anyway, take care everybody. Yasas. Wishing you a great week, and to live, learn and pass it on, and to be the best possible parent you can be by being patient. It's important to be patient and not to overdo things, not to overteach things, and to know that each person has their time, each person has their ability to learn things, but it needs to be at the right time and at their pace. Yasas, take care, and we'll chat again soon. Bye for now.